One of the questions I get asked most about is typically toddlers hitting, biting, kicking, pushing, behaviors that for us as parents are mortifying, right? You're on a play date and your child pushes the other child, or kicks the other child, or bites the other child. Um, so a lot of times I get questions about those behaviors. And while they're pretty alarming for us as parents and really embarrassing, right? I've had people say to me, I'm really concerned my child's going to be a bully because they're physically aggressive in some of these moments. And it's a pretty common problem. And here's why. Toddlers don't have the ability to verbally express their feelings. They don't have the ability to identify how they're feeling and then share that, in a way that'll make a difference, right? So if another child's coming to take their toy, they don't really have the ability to say, I'm playing with this, please leave me alone. And even if they did say that, the other child probably doesn't have the ability to stop their impulses to get the toy and probably wouldn't respond, right? So oftentimes toddlers are left to pushing, biting, kicking, pinching, any form of physical um, intervention that they can think of or that comes to them to stop a child from doing something else, something, taking something or from bothering them or whatever the case may be. So the reason for this, and I just alluded to that a little bit, is a couple of things. Again, toddlers don't have the ability to to manage these situations, to identify their feelings, to verbalize them, and then to do something about it, right? These are all skills that we develop over time. And um, quite frankly, some adults don't have this mastery, right? Adults sometimes resort to violence when their words or their other actions aren't enough. And so these are definitely skills that build over time. The second challenge that toddlers face is that they don't have the ability to put the brakes on or to steer their behavior. So, just the way brain development works, toddlers are very one track mind. They have an idea, an impulse, or a drive to do something, and they follow through with that. They can't really hold two ideas at the same time. So, they can't hold this idea of, I want to hit this person. But if I hit this person, it's going to hurt them, I'll get in trouble, whatever the case may be, right? There's only one idea that they can hold, and it's typically not the consequence. That develops a little bit later. And so they're now driven by this impulse. Once it's in their head, it becomes an action. And so it happens so quickly that they can't stop the behavior or put on the brakes. And this is why, not just with hitting, but many behaviors that toddlers exhibit, we feel like we're saying the same thing over and over and over again. And in truth, it's because we are. Um, because not necessarily that our toddlers don't know they should do something, but in the moment that they have that thought to do something, they can't stop themselves. And so hitting and physical aggression is no different. And so that's kind of what we're facing here, and that's kind of what we're up against as parents. And so while it is normal behavior, I definitely believe it needs to be addressed, right? Our job as parents is to guide and help our children develop these skills. And the best way that we can do that is to, coach them through it, to assist them, to demonstrate how we use those skills ourselves, but also in the moments to help them out. So, first thing that's helpful for us to do as parents is to identify the trigger. So, what is it that's causing your child to go to that physical place? Is it a child invading their space and that they feel like they want space, but they don't know how to say that? Is it are they hungry? Are they tired? Do they not get along with a certain child, just personality wise, and not know how to resolve that? Maybe your child's overstimulated. Sometimes when there's too much noise, too much activity, kids kind of seek that. Maybe they're understimulated and they're seeking some physical stimulation, right? So there's all kinds of triggers. And so the best way we can identify these is really to dissect the situation. Unfortunately, we can't really ask our toddlers. They don't give us many answers, and honestly, they don't know. If they had the ability to identify all that, they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't resort to hitting, right? And that's a brain development. Being able to dissect all that is something that happens later, and they're not really able to do that. So asking them is out. But we really can look at the situation and, take a look at what's playing out and what's triggering them. And then from there, we'll have an idea of what to avoid or how to help them work through it. We also want to identify their feelings. So part of this is setting the foundation for your child to be able to identify their own feelings. So again, if a child's coming to take a toy, to say, I know you're upset that she tried to take the toy, or you're frustrated she won't let you play with this toy, um, or you're feeling overwhelmed, right? Whatever the situation calls for, just simply state the feelings. And this is just has two purposes. It allows your child to understand that you get what they're feeling, and it starts to give them the vocabulary and the language to be able to one day express that themselves, right? So they're learning, okay, this is frustration, and that's the word for it, and this is anger, and this is sadness, this is me feeling overwhelmed. Um, whatever the feeling is, right? And we want to start to build those associations so that our children gain that vocabulary and that ability to express themselves. Um, we want to obviously remind them that that behavior is not okay. And I don't shaming them and embarrassing them is not helpful. But simply saying, we don't hit, we don't kick, we don't pinch. People aren't for pushing. People aren't for hurting. Whatever resonates with you. You can also combine identifying feelings and reminding them not to do something at the same time. So I know you're frustrated, but it's not okay to hit. I know you're tired, but it's not okay to kick. I know you're overwhelmed, but it's not okay to push someone, right? Whatever the case may be. You can kind of take a little shortcut and combine those two. So we also want to identify how their actions affect others. And now this is setting the foundation for what eventually becomes natural consequences, right? So if you have an 8-year-old that starts pushing, hitting, being mean to their friends, naturally what's going to happen is those friends will distance themselves. They won't want to play with them. They won't come over to play. The parents won't let them come over to play, whatever the case may be, right? So that's a natural way that your child's behavior will elicit feedback from their environment. But before we get to that point, we don't really want that 8-year-old that's alienated because of physical aggression. So we want to start identifying like that really, they don't have this idea of what their actions can do. Again, one track mind, right? So the idea of consequences and outcomes aren't there yet. So we're starting to kind of plant that seed and build it for them. And so at this point, just stating, it made Johnny really sad when you pushed him, or you really hurt him when you bit him. I take this a little bit further with my own kids, and I'll say, what can we do to make him feel better? And that's not, I don't force an apology because I know that when children are forced to apologize, that it's not genuine and heartfelt. But some kids show remorse and apologies a little differently. So the way my kids do it sometimes is when they're not so nice to each other, they don't say they're sorry, but then they start sharing things with one another, right? So the child that was not kind to the other child starts to offer a toy or a hug or whatever the case may be. And so we have to be a little bit open when we look at apologies because they look a little bit different. It's not always a say you're sorry. It's really important to get kids to be driven by their own internal voice and their desire to be kind and genuine. And so we kind of want to foster that and not this punitive, you must say you're sorry. That's a little bit off track, but when we start to identify how it makes someone feel, look, they're really hurt. What can we do? Maybe it's you get the kid an ice pack, right? For the boo-boo you just created. Whatever the case may be, really just to identify how their behaviors affect others, and then maybe suggest what they can do. Again, depending on the age of your child, don't expect them to jump at the ability to come up with ideas on how to make it better. You may have to suggest a few, should we give them this toy? Should we get them an ice pack? Should we give a hug? Should we say we're sorry? What should we do? And then kind of let your child tinker with it. You may not get much of a response initially, but again, this is about repetition. This is learning. They're learning new skills and they're learning how to manage these situations. And that takes time. The next step, if we can, redirect the behavior before we get aggressive. So, if we can break down what triggers it, we can also start to avoid those things. So if you know your child doesn't do well on play dates after school, for example, because they're tired and it's been a long day, don't set up play dates after school. If you start to see that another child's continuously trying to take your child's toy, for example, and you can see your child getting agitated, stepping in and saying, so and so is playing with this right now. Should we offer him a different toy? Would you like this toy? Or if your child needs space, to go in and say, I see you're getting frustrated. Would you like to come play with me quietly over here for a few minutes so we can regroup? Right? It's not punitive. It's not a punishment. It's just, this is what I see you're needing, and this is where I see this going. Let's try to work with this. Let's see if we can find a solution right now before we get to that point. I do think that all children need conflict resolution skills, but it's just as important to learn to read our own signals and not get to that place of loss of control. And an understanding of how we function and what we need, and to kind of work with that, so that we don't always have to get to this overwhelmed, aggressive place. We also want to identify options for the child. Now, again, our toddlers can't identify what to do, right? They don't know what their options are. It's like, I'm going to hit him, I'm going to push him, I'm going to kick him, or her. And so we really want to identify it. Now, in the moment, it might be a good time. It might be, your child might be calm enough where you can say, people aren't for hitting. Maybe we can offer them another toy to play with until we're done playing with this toy. Or maybe we can go again to a quiet spot until we're ready to play again. Maybe you just need a little time by yourself, or whatever the case may be. So you can offer that information during the moment. Also, really great idea is telling stories or playing with puppets or acting out scenarios with your child to help them kind of problem solve this and give them examples. So, a story with their favorite characters, and maybe there's a little boy or a little girl who's has a hard time playing with friends and hits and kicks, and here's how it makes their friends feel, and here's the things that they can do to prevent this, and work through it, and kind of start to plant those seeds in a fun, creative way, through stories and games and toys, or acting out with stuffed animals, whatever you come up with. Because kids are listening, and they can learn through these stories and through play. And so playing it out and playing out options is a great way to practice, how to handle situations without having to be in them. And then finally, really important for us as parents really is to just be patient. Again, a toddler's brain is one track. It's not developed enough to understand consequences. And this is what we face again, with numerous behaviors, when we feel like we've said the same thing over and over and over, and we're still saying it, and they're still not doing it. And it's frustrating for us, but we have to understand that they are limited by what their brains allow them to do. And so until our toddlers' brains develop to the point where they have brakes and steering, right, and where they can manage their drives and their impulses, so they can think, I want to hit them, but I won't because I'll get in trouble, right? That's an advanced thought, and that takes a little while. So as their brains develop, as their language develops, typically toddlers tend to be more physical when they're not as verbal, right? And as they get more and more verbal, the physical aggression can decrease because they have more options. Now, having said that, I have seen plenty of very verbal children that still, get aggressive and get physical because they get overwhelmed with emotion. And in those moments, their verbal abilities kind of slide, or they feel like it won't have an impact because you're dealing with another toddler who is also impulse driven. So even saying, that's my toy, please leave me alone, may not get the response you want because their one track mind is that they want the toy. And so there's a lot of things happening in these moments for kids. And so it's really important for us to be patient, to repeat, to continue to remind, firmly and gently, calmly for sure, and to really, collaborate with our children to work through these moments and to help them identify how to handle it, what brings it on, and what options they have. And then for us to continue doing that until they mature enough to be able to implement them themselves. So, as a result, I think we have to be pretty resistant to the fear of judgment and the fear of someone looking at us and thinking that we're not doing something right. And I think this is something every parent struggles with. But please know that if you do these following things, you are addressing it. You're not letting it slide, but you're not necessarily being punitive and punishing them for something that they struggle with, right? Instead, we're collaborating with our kids and really guiding them through how to manage these situations without getting physical. So try these things out. Hopefully, you start to see a little bit of change. Again, it's slow. We don't learn things overnight, so it will be slow and gradual as our children mature, and children mature at different rates. So if your child takes a little bit longer to get it, that is okay. Obviously, if it's not resolving itself and you feel like there's a bigger issue, there are always resources out there to help you and help your child manage situations better. There's some great therapists out there that can help if it's really just something you're concerned about, or you aren't sure if your child's behavior is quite normal. But again, some level of physical aggression or hitting, pushing, kicking is child appropriate, and just a matter of not being developed enough to be able to do any different. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon about the next subject.